lights are bright on Friday night, fall in small Texas town. People train like moths to flame, and there ain't nobody around. Even the cops disregard the shops and the banks.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Central Texas Football Podcast. I'm Kenny Heath here, coming from our worldwide headquarters in Huron, Texas. And once again, Terry Bennett joining me. Terry, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, doing well, man. Week 3, we're already after this week, 30% over with the regular season. This stuff goes by so fast.
It does. And, man, I love this time of year because you got all 3 of the high school, the college, the pro football. It's all in full swing now. Dove hunting. Do you eat live game? Are you a dove eater? Do you like to hunt or eat dove? Or
I used to, like back in the day, I hunted for a while. My issue was I found out I just absolutely love animals. And yes, I do eat them. But also, to be honest with you, hunting was always a little boring for me. I think it's the ADHD in me. I don't sit well for a long time not doing anything. And so I fished and I hunted for a while, but I'm more of I've always got to be in movement or I've got to have sound. And so you can't really do either one of those things when you hunt. I love to shoot, but I'm just not big on hunting.
Yeah, man, my son went on a hunting trip last week to San Angelo, brought home a big old bag full of dove breasts. So we're going to end up eating those sometime this week. I love dove, so another, I'm going to drop Robbie Cartwright's name again out in Lubbock. First time I ever ate a bacon wrapped jalapeno dove was at his house in Lubbock. And I was like, oh, cow.
Yeah,
this is the best thing ever.
I've had dove in a stew. I've had baked dove. I like dove better than duck. Duck's a little bit too greasy for me unless it's done, or slimy, unless it's done really well. I like duck in like a shrimp etouffee kind of style, but with duck. Dove is one of those, man. I loved it. Again, I understand the hypocritical views that I have, that I absolutely think deer and doves and all those are really, really cute, but damn it, deer chili when it's 30 degrees also tastes really, really good. I accept my hypocrisy on that.
Yeah. Well,
I just can't look them in the eyes and kill them. That's all.
No, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. People, some people can, some people can't. That was Mike Graham.
Yes.
Back in a Small Town. That's a good song. Mike Graham, he has a new album out called The Innocent We Lost. If you want to go see some Mike Graham stuff, go to Apple Music, search for him, and go buy some, go listen to him. He's a good dude.
And next week we'll have a screen image and a QR code, so you can just download it straight through. I will say this though, I had heard that song before, and I think I'd heard it from y'all show, and I think maybe a couple years ago Grant used it as one of our fade in songs.
Yeah.
And I had, I'd heard the first part. So when you had sent it to me and you said, hey, I'd like to play this for the open. And so I listened to it the first time. I'm like, oh yeah, it's talking about football. That's great. We'll use it. And then Tuesday night, last night when we were recording Sideline to Sideline, we were using it as what we call a fade in. That means coming in and out of a break. And so we go to the break. And at that time, me and Grant, that's an edit point for me. And so he'll go to the restroom and I'll just sit here and wait. And I listened to the whole song and I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, it's about football, but it's about robbing a bank. Which is what we all said. I know towns still do it, and I'm not trying to get all nostalgic here, but I do remember a day back in 1986, Jefferson, Texas. They won their first state championship, and that's where my dad went to high school, and it's right down the road from Marshall, and like where we live is actually on the Jefferson side of Marshall, meaning it's just right down the road.
Yeah.
And I can remember going, we were leaving to go to College Station to play Cuero for the state championship game. And that morning, it literally was like the last person was leaving town, turned the lights on. And I know it still happens now, but it does feel like, just simply because there's so many more things to do in the world at once. People will just stay home. But back then I do remember thinking, and Dad and them would always joke, man, if we just popped a U-turn right now and hit all the stores, we could make a killing. Of course, it was Jefferson, Texas, so it would have been like $3 in every store, but still. But yeah, I really enjoy that song. Like I said, we'll have a QR code for him next week. That way you can just download it immediately if you're watching this on YouTube.
Hey, Jefferson, Texas. Shout out to Timmy Holt. Did you know Timmy Holt?
No, I
I
don't.
think class of '95. Did they win state or semifinalists in '95
No, 95 would have been
or '94?
yeah, that would
Maybe '94.
well, that was when they were really, really good. Adrian Denmark, who ended up going to play at Notre Dame, played
Okay.
for them, and they were really, really good. And they were like 13-0, and this was supposed to be like the best team since the '86 state, because that's the '86 is the only time they won state, and
Okay.
they got upset by I want to say it was like a Gladewater. I think it was Johnny LeVere, who's now the head coach at Gladewater. I think it was him, and they upset Jefferson. Jefferson's had a couple of those, even after '86. I think '88. One of the teams in '90s, and then one of the teams in the early 2000s, where it looked like nobody could beat them, and then they ended up getting beat. And hey, Jefferson this year is damn good. We saw them against Leonard, and they destroyed them. And then they jumped out big last week on Newton. Newton kind of reeled them back in, but then Jefferson kept a distance and ended up winning. At Cameron Williams, the running back for Jefferson, that dude is he's not super fast, he's not super big. He just you've seen football long enough. You know when you see a D1 running back, and he is a D1 running back. And Jefferson's going to be a real hard beat this year in 3A Division 1 and Region 2.
Yeah, before we, I think the first game we're going to review is Malakoff Lorena, but Region 2 starting to shape up to be a pretty tough little region. Other than Malakoff, you thought maybe if you got on that top side of the bracket, you can cruise into the finals. But I think that District 5 with Whitney and Grandview and West probably a little down. But there's some other teams that they're kind of up.
Yeah, let's talk about that Malakoff Lorena game, because on sideline to sideline, Grant and I we disagree a few times, and we rarely get, like, I say animated. It's nothing, it's not personal, but we get into the debate. And Malakoff Lorena last week was a big debate because he felt like Malakoff was just going to donkey stomp him. He is massively huge on Malakoff. I mean, I am too, but I'm like, Lorena's still Lorena, and they've moved up this year, and I know they're young and they're going to have to figure some things out, but I thought it would be a closer game. And lo and behold, it kind of went both ways, because for 3 quarters, that was a 1-possession game. And then in that 4th quarter, man, Malakoff did Malakoff things and kind of stretched it out on them. But dude, you want to talk about an ugly game, 29 penalties. 9 of them happened on 1 or 2 back-to-back drives. Now, I haven't seen any of the film. I don't know if these were like procedural penalties. Normally when you think 29 and 9, you think, man, what did it get real physical? But neither of the coaches talk like they felt there was dirty shots or anything. But hey, good win for Malakoff, and I think a good showing for Lorena.
Yeah, and I read, I wasn't there. I did watch some highlights on Max, what little they had. I did read the Waco Trib article, and they said the same thing. 29 penalties. Those 2 drives had a bunch. Lorena was down 3 late in the 3rd, so it's still a really good ball game going in the 4th quarter. Mike Jones did what Mike Jones does: 260 yards passing, 97 yards rushing. Yeah, I think that says a lot about. I think it says a lot about Malakoff, but it says a lot about Lorena. They're new guys selling in. I think they rotated quarterbacks a little bit. I think the Smedshammer kid did most of the throwing, but Blanchett did run the ball a little bit. I think that's good for Malakoff. It's tough. It's always going to make them better, and get those kids that are in these new positions kind of settled in, because I know you're a 4A D2 school and you still got La Vega and Connally and some other coming up, but that Koff team kind of measures up with those type of teams.
Yeah, I will be honest though. I wonder with this group. Oh, this is a young team. I just wonder if I get iron sharpens iron. That's the saying that goes around now.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, to an extent, but you can also beat a young team up, and you can also beat a young team's confidence up. And I'm not saying Lorena needed to schedule all 50-0 wins in non-district, but and by the way, this isn't on like Coach Johnson for who he scheduled. A lot of this is when you're Lorena, there's not a lot of teams lining up to play you. So you have to deal with that. But man, I really wish for Lorena, they could have gotten in at least one or two teams that, hey, we're going to be able to empty the bench by the third quarter. We're going to get some confidence in our guys because, dude, they bounce right off of this game and they go play Franklin. And, Lorena and Franklin know each other well. They were in district. They've played 4 games in the last 5 years, 2 of them last year, and that's going to be another huge, big physical mauling of a game. Now, I do think Lorena has a better chance beating Franklin. I'm not saying Franklin is down, but I don't think Franklin is where Franklin was last year. They still got Jaden Jackson, of course. But I think Lorena could win, but that's going to be another game where Lorena's going to remember who they played when they wake up on Saturday.
Yeah. And I agree. That's gonna, they got Flynn and they got a Cameron Yo team, which I don't know really what to think about Cameron Yo.
They'll beat the doors off of Yo.
Yeah, and then Lamb passes, then they roll in the district. And speaking of that,
I was going to say, Lamb passes, man, they can score. They've got a great quarterback. He's not as heralded as Ace Whitehead was back in 2020 and 2021, but it's the same coach. It's the same system. Yeah, Ace Whitehead was really good. In fact, we're going down this week to watch Austin LBJ play Wimberley. And we learned about how awesome LBJ was when in 2020 we went to Lampasas because Lampasas was ranked 3rd in the state and they were hot. And we watched a very physical LBJ team shut them down and ended up beating them. And then that year they, I think, went to the quarterfinals. But then the next year is when they played Stephenville. LBJ played Stephenville in that state championship game. So it's funny because it's kind of the same time of year and everything. But yeah, Lampasas is going to score a lot, and they're going to test Lorena differently than what Franklin and what Yo and what Malakoff is going to do. So again, it's a good schedule for Lorena, and I think they will feel so much better about themselves when they're beating Yo 42-7 next week.
Yeah. Well, let's stay in that district. And, man, I think if you're Coach Aaron Hunter at Gatesville, I know you don't like to lose, but that was a pretty solid effort against Glen Rose. And, man, I'm still thinking that maybe they might sneak into the playoffs.
I think for them, it's a little bit of I like what I see, but, man, Glen Rose has been the bane of their existence for the last 7 to 8 years. Like, Gatesville has lost every way they can to Glen Rose lately. They get their doors beat off, or they play them like they did in this game, where kind of like the Lorena Malakoff game, where in this one it was more of a half. They played great in the first half, and then Glen Rose and then Glen Rose, starts figuring it out offensively and ends up putting up points. So yeah, I think it's partial that, but I think there's a little frustration and like, dadgummit, when are we going to beat these guys? But yeah, it's as good of a loss as you can get. And again, I don't even know, we talked about this when you did the question a couple weeks ago. I don't even know if Gatesville makes the playoffs if it's even what you would call sneaking in. I think if you're not going to sneak in 12-4 Division II. I still contend that the top is way more open than what people realize, though. I mean, La Vega, we'll talk about them. They're 1-1. They lost to Salina. There's no shame in that, but how they lost is a little bit interesting. China Springs 1-1. They lost to Franklin. Connally looked good beating Laga Vista last week. But again, with Connally, it's always, that's great. Now let me see you do it when it matters. And that's been where their issue happens. So yeah, I think 12-4A Division II, we talked about it. It's going to be a Donnybrook once the district starts.
I love that word, Donnybrook. And you look at Gatesville's running back, Rayshawn Smith. He's closing in on, I think he's 3rd all time behind Torian Henderson and LaShawn Thayer, who are 2 pretty good running backs at Gatesville. So they've got a good running game, and we talked about it. They were up 9-7 at the half. And of course, our next game, we're staying in that district, Salina, La Vega. So what were you? So you didn't like the way La Vega lost that game? I know they threw a pick six. They got stopped. Then they threw a pick six, maybe, or they got a big stop.
I mean, it wasn't the issue with La Vega this year is they've still got the great running back. The problem is they're figuring out their quarterback, and you saw that in this game. It was a back and forth game. Again, this is like the third game in a row where, and we always joke on sideline to sideline trends. You start to see trends. Weird trends will happen, just like in the NFL. Whenever there's an look at this week alone. how many MCL sprains we had from key players across the NFL where all of them look like, oh crap, they might be out for the year. And then all of them are, oh no, they'll be back in 3 to 6 weeks. It's not as bad as we thought. And one of the trends this week on all the games is these were back and forth games until a big moment. And then the team that won seized on that and ran away with it. And that's what Salina did to La Vega. And it's not a bad loss for La Vega at all. Look, Salina is special. I mean, that's the thing, Grant talked about it on, he went and saw them scrimmage Liberty Christian, and that's Jason Witten's team. That's a private school team that you could roll into 4A and they would probably be a region finalist type of team. And he saw them and he was impressed. All the coaches shows I do one of them with Cody Worrell, who was the quarterback at Salina back in 2009 when they lost to Carthage in the state championship game. And he's even being told by his people that, hey, a couple years ago, everybody thought that might be Salina's best team in 10, 15 years. They're feeling like that this year. Bo Bentley, their quarterback, he is that quintessential Salina quarterback, except for he also can throw pretty good. They've got a big offensive line. They've got the old bevy of backs. And so it's not a bad loss for La Vega, but the concern for me with La Vega is that quarterback in that passing game going to evolve enough to where when they get into district, they're going to be able to not just have to rely on that running game. And you can rely on Bryson Rowland for a long time. But the thing is, as great as he is, he's not a power back. You can't give this kid 30 carries a game or he'll wear down. He's like 5'6".
Yeah, he's a little dude.
And he's thick. And he's thick. I'll give you that. Yeah. But you just, and you've got a great wide receiver out there in Jaborik Thornton. You've got to find a way to get him the ball consistently. The defense isn't what it has been for a while, but hey, that's today's, football. Yeah. But we'll learn a little bit more about them this week. They take on West Orange Stark, who impressed me when they beat Newton as bad as they did week 1. And then last week, even in a loss against Nederland, they played pretty well against the Nederland team that I think is going to end up being pretty underrated in 5A this year.
Yeah, and I think La Vega I think their quarterback's kind of settling in. That was a tough team they were playing in Salina, and he was 15 for 21 for 224 yards and 3 touchdowns. Of course, like you said, he's got a really good receiver in Jabari Thornton. So maybe kind of settling in, that it's no shame in losing to the number 4 team in D1.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. And they've got, West Orange Stark this week. They got Brownwood next week. They've got Stephenville. Now, this is the thing that concerns me about La Vega. It's Brownwood, Stephenville, Gatesville, China Spring. So, I mean, you're talking about 2 non-district games that are going to be physical and going to be tough. And then you've got Gatesville, and you want to talk about a great way for Gatesville to start district would be to catch La Vega looking past them after playing 2 state-ranked teams and in the China Spring, their big rival, sitting right there the next week. That's a real good spot for Gatesville to be and catch them. And hey, as we said last week, week 1 games are always weird. Week 1 in district's the exact same way. That's when you usually get your upsets, is that first week of district.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's go down to 2A D1. Axtell kind of had a scare against, is it Karnes or Karnes? I think I've heard it called Karnes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So against Karnes, who is a really athletic team, lost, wasn't a 1-score game, but lost to Bremont. I think they were pretty competitive in that. I talked to Coach Horn. He said, hey, look, they're big where they need to be big. They're fast where they need to be fast. They got the best talent around, and they're really good. And he felt good to get out of there with a W. That quarterback, Gunnell, that kid's pretty good.
Yeah, Brent Watkins, the new head coach there, he was the defense coordinator at Malakoff last year. He'd been there for forever. And the first thing he did was move Gunnell from running back to quarterback. And you saw it paying off in the Bremont game as well. I think he had a couple fumbles that I think they lost like 30-15, but it was closer than that. And then, he had a huge day against Axtell, going for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. But more importantly for me, 6 of 10 passing for 103 yards. And that's not amazing, but he's not a guy, he's a scramble. He's a running, or how you call it, a throwing running back, so to speak. That's what my old coach used to call him. He's a throwing running back. But if he can complete 60% of his passes and not make a lot of mistakes, this team's going to be really good. It's going to take him a while. Karnes is one of those teams that's always had the look, has always had the talent, but you need the coaching, and at times they get real inconsistent. At times they lose interest, and football's not always the main thing on their plate. With Coach Watkins there, and what he likes to do defensively will fit in with their athleticism. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to, he's not a disciple of the old school 10-1. We're talking Salina again, but a lot of his 4-3 concepts, if you watch Malakoff last year, shooting those gaps, things like that, I think this will look. I think we're all going to look back later and go, man, that was a really good win for Axtell.
That's what I was going to ask you. So looking back, you think that, Levi Leathers went for 232 and a touchdown, saw his highlights. That kid looks really good, looks polished. He's really accurate. For the most part, he had, Coach Horn will tell you, hey, we're small. We're not very big, but he had some time in the pocket to throw. Of course, it's just a highlight film. So does that make you feel, Axtell being down early, coming back and winning that ball game? Do you still like Axtell to be kind of a region favorite?
Yeah, the one thing that I think I always say, and we do it when we watch all football now, and we do it even when we watch the NFL, but college and rankings and how teams look when they win at times ruins how we look at other levels of football. And you can get caught up sometimes too much in the score. Well, like, man, how did they not beat Karnes worse? Karnes was 5-6 last year, 6-5. I can't remember. I know it was something like that. They were that. Why isn't Axtell, who's supposed to be a region threat, winning that game? Well, you don't know what both teams are working on week 2 of the football season. I've done, I've been around coaching. I coached, and people think I'm crazy when I say this, but not every team, especially a team that thinks they're going to go far in the end of the season, they're not always just going out pulling out all the stops in week 2. They're still maybe running 30% base offense. They're still running, basic defensive calls with no twist, because they just need their guys to, especially when you're talking about like just using Karnes as an example, a new coach. You're still just trying to get your guys to line up properly. You don't want to get exotic yet. And for Axtell, for them, I think they're just trying to lay this base of, what I would call consistency. Be good every week, win every week. You win now with your basic stuff. And then when you start playing those playoff teams and you start, hopefully for them, getting past that first round, finally, that's when you start pulling out the stops. And that's when you let Levi Leathers and that group just go crazy. And, I don't think anything less of Axtell. I think just win is the biggest thing right now. Now, if they go in this week to Iola and it's a 16-14 game, I will be a little concerned, and no offense, Iola, but that should be one of those kind of like, I think it'll probably be a lot like Milano last week. It'll be a feel-good game for them.
Any other game? So that's all I've got on my sheet. Any other games in the Central Texas area that kind of caught your eye or you want to talk about from last week?
Hang on. Let me look real quick at our stuff from Tuesday night. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. A little bit at the top of your area, but because we're, did you have Glen Rose Brownwood on the sheet from last week? I thought that was an interesting game. For this week. I'm sorry, that was preview. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yeah, I think that's all we have on the review part.
All right. No, I did not have Glen Rose Brownwood on the preview, but I do have Grandview and Connally. Now, Grandview was behind early against Eagle Mountain, which is a new school up there in the Saginaw Balls, or Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD. Yeah. Coach Mullins from Toller took over that program. They were up early. Grandview fought back. They climbed back in it and won the game. Now they got Connally. What's your thoughts on that one?
So, I think Glen Rose is better than Connally. We saw what Glen Rose did to Grandview. Now, that's a rivalry game, so they probably did pull out a little bit some of the stops, and they're not just running base defense and offenses against Grandview. the win against Eagle Mountain, I think, is a little bit more impressive coming back than what people understand. A, Jeremy Mullins, great coach. B, Eagle Mountain is probably already attendance-wise a class higher. I mean, that's how big that area is growing. If Connally plays like they did against Laga Vista last week, they can almost name their score in this game. If Connally decides to play with their food, which the cadets sometimes do, Grandview is that prototypical team of football players that know how to just play football. They could come up and bite them. I don't think they will. I think Connally will win pretty comfortably.
Yeah, man, I think they found their the successor of the running back that Connally had last year, Seifert. What was his name?
Oh, yeah, I know you're talking. Kirby Seifert? Was it? It's a weird name.
Yeah, I went to North Texas.
Yeah, he was he was fun to watch. Let me see. His name is Kiefer Sibley. Kiefer Sibley and Kobe Black. Those were the two studs last year. Jamari
every week last week, but we talked about him every week last week, and I forgot about him. But I think they found his successor in Brooklyn Ford. That kid is really good. He played last year when Sibley was out, and then Jamarian Vincent's a stud, probably the best athlete in the district as far as a football player. I think I agree with you. If they don't play with their food, if they go out and play like they did with Lago, I just don't think it's going to be a ball game.
No, I don't either. And you and I talked about this in the preview show. Grant and I have talked about it on Sideline to Sideline 3A show. And he's a little bit more like, hey, it's still Grandview. And I get it. Tradition does matter in this sport. But I think Grandview is at least a step less than what they were last year. Now, can they make that up? Of course they can. If players develop, because this isn't a talent issue, it's more of just a youth issue. And it also hurts that you lose a guy like Jill Allen. I mean, that you don't understand. I mean, that was going to be what they built the team around. He could literally have drugged these young guys to be better. And now that he's gone, you're having to figure it out. But they have talent. It's a lot of young talent.
Yeah, and I think before the season started, they were already down 2 linemen, one for the season, one till I think midway through district. He may come back before then, so they were just starting off on the wrong foot with injuries, transfers, and I think this will. We talked about it. I don't know if iron's going to sharpen iron this week, but it'll make them better. And I just really I couldn't tell you who's going to win that 3A. I don't know who's going to win that with Whitney, West, and Grandview, because I can see. I think Woodard does a really good job doing more with less over there in West, and I think Ebner's kind of the same way. The kid, he can really coach him up, and I think Whitney's got some talent, but nobody. It'll be fun to see how it all plays out.
Oh, I'm telling you, we talked a little bit about it before we started recording. If the Maypearl that played Mart shows up during district, I think that they're finally, they've been that team for the last 5 years that everybody keeps saying, just wait. They've got the guys. Last year they go 7-4. This year they've got everybody back. They lose to Mart 36-34. Mart goes for 2 in OT to get the win. I mean, in a district where everybody's a little bit at the same, I could see Maypearl. I don't even know if it'd be surprising people, but I could see Maypearl coming out on top. But I think we said this in our little preview. I don't think anybody in this district goes unbeaten in district. This is going to be week 10 is going to be crazy, because I have a feeling in 5-3 Division I, there's going to be like 7 different scenarios. And it wouldn't shock me if every team is technically alive for the playoffs going into week 10.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either. We're staying in this 4A, that 4A D2 District 12, Alvarado and Robinson. Robinson's 2-0. Kind of had a little harder time with her than maybe we thought they were going to have, but they're 2-0, and they're going to go against a really good Alvarado team.
Yeah, Alvarado, for 20 years, they were a team that, they grinded you down with that power-based running game, and then they would play really good defense. And a couple years ago, they made the change, and Casey Walraven came in. And last year, 2 years ago, they went 5-6, but They pulled off at the time one of the biggest shocks when they beat Stephenville 50-49, and then they took a good at that year. I'm not saying right now because Lake Worth is in a rebuild, but they took a really good Lake Worth team in the playoffs in the first round to the mat. Ended up losing like 23-20. They started out the year beating Godley and Van Alstyne. Okay, but when you score 71 points, that you take notice. Robinson, they struggled with Caldwell last week for a little bit. But again, this is a team that hasn't won more than 5 games in I think 10 years. And so they're learning to win again. And so you're going to get in these games. And that's a game against Caldwell that 2 years ago, I don't know if Robinson wins. And so they start the year off beating West. They beat Caldwell. I think they're going to get their doors beat off of them the next 2 weeks, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because they've got Alvarado and then they go on the road to Glen Rose. For them, you got to be looking at the first 3 weeks of district, and this is what's going to hurt them. They play Lorena, Connally, and La Vega 3 weeks in a row. That is going to be really, really tough. And to be fair, no matter who you are in this district, you're going to have a 3 or 4 game stretch where it's hell. But for Robinson to start out like that, that's going to be tough because I easily see them being 0-3 going into Gatesville and China Spring. And then, then you're just going, you got to beat Gatesville. Are you going to have the guys? So I like where Robinson is. I just feel like they got placed in just a really tough draw this year.
Yep, I agree with you. Let's go down to 2A. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to be fair, I think some of the years where they haven't been good, that's been a big issue. They're just in an area where, China Spring, and then when Lorena, when they're up in 4A and La Vega's, they're just in an area that's football rich. So that could be why they've been down for so long, is a lot of it's just who they're playing.
Yeah, and they butt up right next to University, right there. That high school is right down the road from Robinson.
Yep.
So. Let's go 2A and Crawford, who's 1-1, going against a Hamilton team that's 2-0, that's beat Millsap and Early pretty convincingly. Not really surprised about Hamilton being 2-0, but always root for that Hamilton County school, and I think that's going to be a good test with Crawford. And I don't know, is it going to tell you more about Hamilton or more about Crawford, whoever wins this game?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think where I know that Hamilton coach from. I think it would tell you more about Hamilton, even though, you and I have talked multiple times about, what is Crawford this year. I still don't think we know after going 0-2, but you're playing 2 3A teams, and in both of those, and I know Annis Shiro isn't a great 3A team, but they consistently make the playoffs now. They're not the doormat that they used to be. In Centerville, the Tigers are a really good athletic 3A team. And you lose 31-20, you lose 27-21. I think those are competitive, but those are games in the past that Crawford won by a lot, and so, I think, that's a good question. I still think it means it. I'm not saying it means more. I think it will know more after this game either way, but if Hamilton is able to win this game with a comfortable score, I think that's going to tell us that maybe Hamilton is ready. Again, I don't know how good that's going to be going forward. Hamilton, Heiko, that whole area, we were talking about that. It's just such a hard read on those teams. A, we don't get a ton of information. But B, also, it's just they're just always they're always good. They're never like amazing. They can beat teams that they should, and they lose the teams that they should. So it's really always hard to get a read on them.
Yeah, and Crawford's they're 1-1. They lost to Centerville. Well, Centerville and Grosebeck are going to pair up this week, and man, Grosebeck has put a lot of points on the board. They've also given up a lot of points. I don't know, Coach Bomar does a great job over there. He's kind of an offensive guru type dude. I don't know. They're going to have to find some defense eventually because they give up 42 to Rogers and 53 to McGregor, and McGregor got curb stomped by Hillsborough the week before. Of course, they did lose their quarterback early on. I guess he's back now. What's your thoughts on Grosebeck?
Well, to be fair to Coach Bomar, last year they were good defensively. They've only returned like 2 guys. And one of the things that I've always been impressed with what Jerry Bomar does is whatever is his strength, he'll lean into that. If he's got a stud running back, he's going to run that dude for 2,000 yards. If he's got a stud defense and his offense sucks, he understands that. And so this year, I think he's like, hey, I've got 90% of my offense back. I've got Trent Platt at quarterback, who's really good. I got Jordan Smith, who's a really good running back. So screw it. We're going to play basketball, and we're going to score as many points as we can. And then saying that, they're hoping their defense gets better as they go. And they have a stud defensive end. But the problem is if defensive end is one of those positions that if that's your only strength, that can be blocked. You can figure out how to just run the other way 9 times out of 10. And I know they had talked about possibly moving him around a little bit and playing him a little bit at linebacker for that reason. Nick Lascano's his name because he's just like he's a typical 4A defensive end. It's not like he's 6'5" or anything. You could play him at linebacker. And I know some had said that they might do that. But yeah, I just think Bomars goes, hey, this is what we are. And so let's just go out there and let's empty our guns every Friday night. And if you're a GOAT fan, if nothing else, you're going to have a lot of fun because, man, they play, Centerville this week, always athletic, as we talked about. They play Lexington, who might have the best quarterback in 3A Division II. And then they hit that district, as we keep talking about. And Grosebeck, let's say you're Whitney and you're going in. I think they play the second to the end of the season. Let's say you need a win against Grosebeck to get into the playoffs. And they're averaging 50 points a game. That's scary because you never know what you're going to get with a team like that. Again, that's why I say 5-3A Division I. My Terry Bennett lock is nobody goes unbeaten in this district. It's just even Mejia, who has just been a cesspool of drama and crap for 20 years. When you see them on the field, they're still scary. They're always scary. They're fast. They're athletic. If they ever engage to want to play football, they can beat anybody on any given week. The problem is you just never know if they're going to be engaged and want to play football.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the Trent Platt kid. He's a senior this year. Back when he was a sophomore, I believe, their starting quarterback at Grosebeck got hurt. He stepped up. And that kid, last week went for 325 and 3 touchdowns. And he also rushed for 118 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, he's not a big kid. He's kind of a grinder. I mean, that dude just has no quit in him. And it's fun watching him play. Last year, I don't think he played in that playoff game against Winton. I think he was hurt. I think the running back, I think he played. He was kind of hobbled. The running back was out. Jordan Smith, who he only had 6 carries for 81 yards and touchdown, and five catches for 112 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he returned a kick for 79 yards. So they're loaded at the skill position at Grosebeck. And like you said, they brought back 2 on defense. So if they find some way to get that defense to work, hey, let's hold them to 30 or less. And I agree with you. That district's going to be wild.
Yep.
All right, so I got Lexington and Rockdale as our last little preview. Lexington's off to a great start. Rockdale's undefeated at 2-0. They graduated a few kids. I agree with you, and I think Case Evans is probably the best 3A D2 quarterback in the state. He's really good. I think he's just a junior, maybe sophomore. I think he's a junior.
I think he's a junior.
I think Lexington rolls. I think it's going to be a good test for Rockdale. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Lexington can name their score. Yeah, he's a junior. I think Lexington can name their score. This used to be a really underrated rivalry. Back when Rockdale was trenched in at 2A, and they had some pretty good battles. And I understand it's been 7 years ago, but it still blows my mind when you see what Rockdale has done the last few years, that this is a team that won state like in 2017. They have just not been able to be consistent. Again, part of it is that longtime coach when they won state, he retired. It's kind of become a churning coaching mill the last 7 years. I like what Hunter Hamrick's doing there. They're very young this year, though, and that's a big issue. They're 2-0, but I mean, they beat Smithville and they beat Hempstead. Neither one of them are real shiny. What Lexington did to Little River Academy, I was really impressed with. And I know Little River Academy doesn't have what they had last year, but still, Little River Academy is very physical, and I still think going to be a really good team in Division I by the end of the year. They held Marlin to 12, and that's the thing. For all the talk about Case Evans and stuff, Lexington this year, I think their defense is going to be what gets them going further down the year, because last year, man, East Bernard just scored at will on them in the playoff game. It was shocking. Even though the offense was completely banged up and injured, and Evans was, on one leg at that point, they still scored 23. It was the defense that gave up 31, but they returned 8 from there. I think they'll name their score against Rockdale.
Okay, let's stay in that Rockdale district, and I agree with you on that. Troy's 2-0. We're not previewing that game. They beat Hillsboro last week. Close game, 27-20. Do you think that Troy's kind of caught up with Little River Academy? You think Troy's in the running for that 2 spot, or do you still like Little River on that one?
I still like Little River. Until I see them do it. I mean, Hillsboro is okay. Salado is okay. Neither one of them are like, they're not bad win. I don't think there's anything what I call a bad win, but I think Little River's 2 losses, even though they were going away losses, I think they've learned more about them against Connally and Lexington than Troy can learn against who they've played. Now, by the time they get to the season, we'll see. They got Rogers this week. They've got Maypearl in 2 weeks. And then they got Franklin to start the season or the district play. So, that district's just really weird. It felt stronger at the beginning of the year. Now, I mean, you've got, Troy's 2-0 and Rockdale's 2-0, but I mean, again, who have they played? Franklin, they haven't exactly looked like world beater in their game against China Spring, but it was China Spring. I mean, that's a 4A team, and that has become a really good little small rival. We'll know more about Franklin this week against Lorena. So yeah, right now I still think it's Franklin. I think it's Franklin and then everybody else. And I still think LRA is a little bit ahead of everybody else, but we got a long way to district there.
Real quick, we got 0-2 Marlin team, lost to Lexington. We just talked about them and Honey Grove, and we talked about that before we started recording. They've got Chilton this week. Do you think they get off the snide and get that W?
Man, if they're mentally right with ball and everything, I think so. Chilton got beat by Italy last week, and it wasn't real competitive. Chilton's offenses have struggled the first 2 weeks. They scored 13 against Hearn. They scored 6 against Italy. I think for Marlin, if they can get out early and kind of start imposing their will, I think they'll win comfortably. But it's going into Chilton, man, and that that's not always an easy place to play. And so I think Marlin wins, and I think they win by about 2 touchdowns.
All right. Hey, I'm going to go through some games. Let's do some quick hits. You tell me who you think's going to win. All right.
All right.
China Spring, Waco University.
Waco University.
Yeah, I got University.
That was habit right there. I'm thinking of China Spring. And look, China Spring is going to be fine. But I'm thinking of China Spring, 2 years ago.
How about Clifton, who's 2-0, and Italy, the Italy Gladiators?
I like Italy in that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Italy in that one. Clifton's, I love that they're 2-0, but they've got some things they've got to figure out. I just think the Gladiators, it's going to be close though, but I like Italy.
West Orange start, Waco La Vega.
2 weeks ago, I'd have said Waco La Vega wins by 21. Now I'm going to say Waco La Vega wins by 14. I think Waco La Vega will feel a lot better about themselves after this game.
We didn't talk about this game last week, but Toller went in and beat Tig, and now Tig's got Ferris. What are your thoughts? I mean, a lot of people had Tig winning that district. You still feel that way?
I don't know, man. Tig is one of those that you hear me say it a lot. You feel like you get a read on them, and whenever you think they're going to zig, they zag. Whenever you think they're going to, win 10 games, they win 5 and miss the playoffs. Whenever you think they're going to struggle, they do like they did last year, and they get better as the season goes along, and they end up winning a couple playoff games. I think they're going to still win this 9-3A again, partially because outside of Westwood, who else is really there? Dieball seems a little bit down this year. Of course, they played a tough schedule. They're going to Coach Morrison. They're going to have the Lumberjacks just be really good defensively, but they were replacing a lot defensively. I'm just that loss kind of kind of confused me. I'll admit that. I really, Toller's moving up a class. They lost everybody except for Peyton Brown, their running back. We talked about Coach Mullins. He moved over to Eagle Mountain View. But yeah, I still think Tig at the end of the day will win 9-3. Them or Palestine Westwood. Palestine Westwood's really good this year.
Yeah, I think I like Westwood, and I saw Tig beat West last year in Belton, and I thought, they got a lot of athletes on there, but man, Westwood, I've watched some of their film. Those dudes can get it over there. Let's go Glen Rose Brownwood.
Glen Rose. Brownwood just doesn't have enough offense.
And I had one more for you. Let me find it right quick. Rogers and Troy.
I'm going to go Troy. Rogers is scoring a lot, but their defense is struggling, and I'm going to go with Troy feeling good about themselves, and the Trojans make it 3-0.
All right, man. So where are y'all headed this weekend?
Wimberley versus Austin LBJ down in Austin. Where that gives us a chance to see top 10 teams in 4A Division I and Division II. So 3 weeks into the season, we'll have seen the top team in 4A Division I and 4A Division II the first week of the season. Last week, we saw the top 5 team in Bushland in Division I 3A, and Canadian, a top 10 team in Division II 3A. And then this week, we're seeing the two top 10 teams. So that's always what we try to do during the regular season. People always ask, well, why don't you go to this game? It's a better game. Well, sometimes it's not about the game. It's we need to see that team so we can kind of calibrate what we're thinking as the season goes along, and especially as we get into the playoffs.
You're going to leave. So that's a Friday night game, I'm guessing. So leaving early. What's your food looking like?
We don't know Saturday or Friday yet. We're kind of open that. We're making a special trip Saturday morning. We're going to leave about an hour later because we're going to go to the Texas Chili Parlor, which is downtown Austin. Amazing chili. I'm not normally a hot weather chili guy. I love chili, but I can eat when it's cold. I can eat 2 bowls a week, and I will. But this place is so special. I will happily eat it. Even when it's supposed to be 98 degrees down there. We got, everybody keeps saying false fall. This is more like false summer, or summer's one last gasp. It just, unfortunately for us football fans, it happened on a Friday. It's going to be Friday and Saturday when it's super hot, but it's worth it to go down to the Texas Chili Parlor.
I've never been there. I know Guy Clark sings a song, or he mentions it in the song. Yeah. So I've wanted to go, but I've never been there. So that may put that on my list one day. I always kind of gauge my trips on, trying to hit barbecue joints because we got a podcast and a work for that, so I try to hit those
speaking of, that's going to be debuting in October. I've got you sent me the first episode over, and I've been tinkering with it a little bit, but we wanted to kind of get the rush of the first part of football over because our YouTube channel is such football heavy right now. We wanted to kind of wait, and then also I never thought of it this way. Maybe it's just me. I've always thought of barbecue as a spring and summer thing, but apparently a lot of people kind of think of it like I do chili. They think of barbecue when it gets into the fall and like the colder temperatures. And maybe that's just all the people that go to like Franklin and stand in line. They don't want to stand in line in August like me and Grant did a few years ago. But yeah, I've watched your first episode. It's really, really good. So yeah, that's going to be coming down the pike. I'm excited about that.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Hey, Terry, I appreciate you hopping on. Thank you, Ranch Master, for sponsoring again, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, I just think we just go ahead and just say for the rest of the year, it's you and I. We're going to be riding Central Texas every Wednesday night.
All right. We'll do it, buddy. Appreciate it, man.
All right.
Like moths to flame, and there ain't
nobody around.
Please stop.
You don't want me singing?
I want to keep people coming to the show.